Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Podcast Assemble, show where you come for your regular geeky download. My name's Tommy, and I'm delighted, as always, to be joined by my friend and co-host from across the pond. It's a drowning wet Thor.
Drowning? Oh, because it's yeah, it's wet. Yeah, it's wet.
My partner sent me a video the other day of the road outside our house, and thank heavens
like
you're
Manly.
not there, because you would be like directing the fish. You'd be like,
Tom, this is why I live on a hill.
yeah, so do we.
All right, look down on the people that are flooded. You know, down on the peons.
It was like coming out of the drain, like the drainage system, like next to our house.
Bro, it's crazy. I mean, like, it's crazy. The only place I think that rains more than Sydney the last 2 weeks is Gotham. Because that movie was it was raining the entire
Big
time.
spoiler for what's coming up soon. Welcome to anyone who's
Yeah.
come in, by the way, from the competition. We appreciate you all being here. We will be announcing the winner for the competition just before we get into our main topic, which there will be time codes in the description if you want to jump around and get to that. But if you want to stick with us, that would be nice too. So little stinger for you there. We are going to let you know who's going to win. So other than drowning, mate, what's been happening?
Ah, dude, I've just been living life, hanging out,
Living the dream.
Yeah. I didn't get to do much this week, other than watch some of the stuff that I'd already been kind of watching, but I finished a lot of stuff. So
Ooh, I love that.
I guess I finished one thing.
I love ticking stuff off the list. You know when it's like the list and you're like, yeah, finally I can get past this.
Yeah, I'm still behind on Peacemaker, but I'm excited to do it. I mean, and honestly, the main topic movie, which we've already spoiled,
Took an entire evening.
it's 3 hours long, so like it was a big chunk of my evening. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that though, because I was reading a thing the other day about Netflix, and I think partly to do with like the pandemic and partly to do with like people's watching and viewing habits. Like they're apparently going to change some of their streaming service in terms of the way they drop stuff. So apparently they're going to stop just dropping everything at once. It's going to be like a mishmash of stuff. And I know that I think some of that's going to start with Stranger Things. I think they're doing 2 drops. So they're dropping the first half of the season in May and then the second half later on. And it's like, it's interesting because everyone wants to get that, that water cooler TV. You're going to work and you're talking with all your friends. And Netflix can't really have that because you just binge it, then you move on, you forget about it. So they're streaming. Like people like binge for a bit and then just leave and come back later. So that's really interesting.
I mean, it just does feel like something that like the algorithm didn't need to tell them. You know what I mean? Like we all knew that. Like Disney, HBO, none of them did it all at once except for Netflix.
Yeah, well that's
like
it.
it helps build mystique, right? Like you would think that they would have done this a while ago, but I think it was also just their thing. It was like this is what we do, and now they're like established, so they're like. We don't.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, they don't need to just chuck everything out at once. Like it was a nice gimmick almost.
It was a gimmick. It was a
It
gimmick.
kinda
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, I
that's
feel
the
like
word I
the
was
Stranger
looking for.
Things and stuff of the world, they could chuck that. They could do that week by week now. They could start doing some shows week by week for sure. So what have you been up to?
I finished Yellow Jackets.
Oh yeah, sorry, you said.
Which, dude. You don't sound that intrigued by the show, but you really this is one of the ones I'm going to tell you you should watch it. It's like a psychological thriller that's like horror where you can't quite tell if it's supernatural, can't quite tell if it's not, and it's like that. Like it's like Lost basically, but a better not as 90s version.
Ooh,
So if you liked Lost, and apparently they've like already greenlit like 5 seasons.
5. Wait, is this with Netflix?
No, it's with Showtime. So they obviously
Right.
have which is like the HBO equivalent.
Okay.
Like the second tier HBO show. They obviously have a plan, which is like what Lost didn't have. It was just J.J. Abrams throwing spaghetti at a wall.
Seeing what sticks.
And it's like an all-female cast pretty much, which is very like refreshing.
Oh, that's nice.
I've talked about this before.
I like that.
But I finished it, and the season, it was a really good first season, like solid first season.
Did it end on a cliffhanger?
Kind of. Not really. It ended less cliffhanger, more like there was one cliffhanger.
Okay.
But a lot of the stories got like closure as well.
That's
so
good.
it was like a good mix. And then I started watching, continued to watch Castlevania.
What are you feeling about Castlevania?
Dude, Castlevania is really cool. I like it. I'm glad I have 2 more seasons.
Yeah, nice.
Like I'm halfway through season 2. Yeah.
Castlevania, it's interesting you say that because I mentioned last week I was going to elaborate on a very geeky show in a sort of similar vein to that. And I really think you would like this. So I've been watching the show the last week. I've only got 3 or 4 episodes in maybe. And it's called Hit Monkey. It is, you might have seen it on Disney Plus. It got a like pretty big advertising push at the beginning, but it's kind of fallen off a bit. And it's based on a comic property basically, but it's really fucking cool. I don't want to give too much away because the first episode sets up like the entire series, but it essentially like it's a monkey who goes around doing hitman stuff, but there is also another character.
A hit monkey.
Yeah, literally hit monkey. Yeah. There is another character in it who I can only describe to you as like Archer, but more X-rated. Like, it's incredible. Like,
so you said it's a anime?
Kind of, yeah, kind of. It's a Disney Americanized version of an anime, so it's just an animation basically.
Okay.
But it's really good, man. Like, I've watched like 3 or 4 episodes. Like, the characters are all compelling. Considering it's a monkey who can't speak. Like, he just grunts. Like, it's super compelling. It's really interesting.
That is hamstrung. Like, the hamstrings your main character if he cannot speak.
Well, it's the Archer-esque character who's the one who really drives it forward. And, like, he is...
I was going to say, he talks. Archer talks.
I mean, he doesn't shut the fuck up. That's the best part. I really like that character. I think you'll watch it, and, like, the first episode kind of focuses on him, and then sort of it gradually moves towards the hit monkey. I think you'd really like it. It's way up your alley, especially because you like Archer so much.
Yeah, I'll check it out. The other thing I watched, which was something I've talked about before on the show, is The Sinner. It's like a detective thriller that is it's generally highly rated. I don't know if it's a Netflix original, but I like, you know how like sometimes Netflix like says it's an original, but it's also BBC.
Yeah, they buy shit all the time and call it originals. Yeah.
I think it's one of those, but for the US, like it's not BBC, but it's who's the girl in the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Jessica Biel.
Jessica Biel?
Like had a thing with Justin Timberlake, that girl.
Okay.
Jessica Biel.
All right.
Anyway, she produces the show, and she was like starred in the first season, and it basically every single season is like a really, really nuanced like is this like a gray crime where it's like, what do you do here? Like, the kid is underage, he was super abused, and he unintentionally killed someone or something, you know what I mean? And but it's like a mystery, and as you uncover it, you're like, oh, I don't know how to feel about this. Like, if I was the judge, what would I do? So it's a really good little crime thriller if you're into that.
I feel like all your things are super interesting and really like intense, or it's the things I'm gonna say. You'll be like, you'll probably laugh at
I don't know. That's definitely where I lean, but every now and again I do need like a jolly exit from that. So I appreciate your taste.
Well, yeah, I do like that sort of stuff as well, to be perfectly honest. Like, but I did this week watch The Tinder Swindler. I'm not gonna lie to you. Oh God, no, you didn't. I finally caved. Like, everyone's talking about it.
I feel like I have no desire to watch that because I know exactly what it's gonna be.
Neither did I. Like, but everyone was banging on about it, and I just wanted to see if it was just, you know, like some like full-on idiots who got swindled really easily, or whether this guy was actually, you know, if it became something like almost like a thriller. And I was like, it wasn't as interesting as everyone says it is.
So it was a bunch of idiots that just got swindled.
I mean, you don't want to blame the victim, right? But at the same time, you're a bit like, this dude's literally like, so the dude rocks up, he meets the girl on Tinder, they go on one date, and then he says, do you want to come with me on a flight to Amsterdam? And the girl's like, absolutely. It's like, who does that? Like, I get it. It's a dude who appears really rich, but he could also be a murderer. This could be Hostel, the movie. So I'm like, there's got to be something. You know, you've got to have a certain mentality to accept that invite, right?
I think for sure. And you also have a certain mentality to be like so impressed by the private planes that you continue to do all this dumb shit, despite the fact that there's obvious red flags.
Oh, I mean, by the time you get like past the first couple of weeks, it's like a fucking like cascade of.
It's a cascading crescendo of red
it's
flags.
The Red Sea coming at you. That's
yeah,
just like it is in Sydney right now.
It's not red, let me tell you. It's fucking dark and gray and wet. Anyway, that's pretty much all I watched off the top of my head. How about yourself?
Yeah, outside of the 2 I mentioned, there's just one other thing. I finally got around to reading some comic books for the first time in a bloody long time, and I've had Civil War 2 sat on my mantelpiece for a while. When I was coming over here, one of the last things I watched before I flew out back to the UK was the Civil War movie. And I'm a huge fan of those storylines. And Civil War 2 is one I think I read a while ago, but I can't 100% remember. And I rebought it in a really nice plush, like it's softback, but it's a really nice cover. And I read through that. The really nice cover on it and artwork, etc. lasted about a day because I left it on the side, and then my little nephew came over, and his thing at the minute is grabbing books. And you know, like when you flip through like you just like across like the outside of a book.
Yeah.
His thing is doing that, but like he's obviously completely uncoordinated as a 1-and-a-bit-year-old, so he just bends the hell out of it. So this nice comic issue that I bought was essentially destroyed. But it was a really it's really interesting, and I'd completely forgotten half of the plot beats, like spoilers for that comic book. But like Iron Man essentially dies at the end of it and becomes an AI for a different character. Like it introduces a bunch of other people who I think we're going to start seeing throughout the actual MCU, like Riri Williams, who is going to be like the kind of Ironheart new Iron Man, bunch of others. But it's the kind of conflict this time is like Captain Marvel versus Iron Man, so it's a slightly different twist on it, and it's almost bending the formula of in the first Civil War, much like the movie. Cap's like, if we start trying to stop crimes before they happen, that like bad things happen, and Tony Stark's like, if we've got the opportunity, we should be doing it. And in this one, it's a case of it's flipped. So now Captain Marvel's got the opportunity to stop crimes and stuff before they happen, and Tony Stark's like, whoa, we've done this, haven't we? So it's nice that it's like a changing round of the personalities.
No, that's good. I how much did it kill you to see the bent pages of that comic
like
book?
considering it was like brand new as well. Nah, he's a 1-year-old. Like, so what? Like, I'll get over it.
Yeah, of course you can't blame him, but in your heart you were like, like a part of you died.
Well, it's like it was on top of my Mac, so I was literally like, my Mac was sat there, and I was like, if he goes one thing lower, he's probably gonna spill or like drop whatever it is on my Mac. And I was like, just gonna move. I'd rather him take the comic. I'm like, you take this, and I'll just swing this out while you're not looking.
Fair enough.
Speaking of not looking, did you happen to spot this week the trailer for Bullet Train? Did you see that?
I did see it.
Damn, that looks
Brad
cool.
Pitt, and I didn't. Was there any other? I mean, it was a really good trailer.
Damn, it was a good trailer.
Like if the whole movie's like that, like pew, 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 pew,
yeah,
pew, like it'd be quite good. Was there anyone else in it that was like notable? I just noticed Brad Pitt as like the main guy that I recognized.
Well, it's David Leitch who's directing. He's known for a bunch of stuff. Like he was a producer on John Wick. He did a bunch of stuff on Deadpool 2, Hobbs and Shaw. So like he's done some pretty cool. I mean, maybe not Hobbs and Shaw, but he's done some pretty cool action movies. I think there's a bunch of people weaved in there who you maybe don't spot on a first glance. Like Zazie Beetz is in there. Aaron Taylor Johnson's in there. He's a favorite of the show. There's a few like random ones.
He's a favorite of the. Is he a favorite of the show?
Kind of a look. Yeah, maybe I've just got a man crush. Michael Shannon's in it. Brian Tyree Henry. So like it looks like it's gonna be it just looks like it's gonna be badass.
Yeah.
What did you think? I mean, the action for me kind of looks sort of like, almost like, I mean, I've already said it, but kind of Deadpool-ish. Kind of meets Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but like on a train.
In Las Vegas, it was like I mean, that was the vibe. I don't know, but the action was like, yeah, it was comical, but also just like kind of karate count kung fu influenced. It felt like, where he was like using the briefcase as like a weapon, like really flashily.
And you saying that's a bad thing?
It was really good, man. No, I'm just saying. I'm just saying it was less superhero-y and more kung fu. But the Deadpool comment, I agree, because they're cracking jokes in between, like punches.
And he kind of looks a bit like Space Cadet. That's where the Fear and Loathing thing came from. And he also had the pie hat on.
Yeah.
Classic returning to his roots.
Dude, how does he still look this good?
I don't know. It's frustrating as hell,
Doesn't
isn't it?
make any sense. Yeah, like what the
Speaking
fuck?
of man crushes, damn.
Like, yes, that's fair. I will give you that.
Well,
one.
like I love the fact that he had. Speaking of Deadpool, he had a cameo in Deadpool 2, didn't he? And it's like a blink and you miss it. So it's the one. He's the invisible guy when he puts the X-Force team together.
He's the guy that dies.
Yeah, like immediately,
Yeah,
and you get like a flash of him, like on the electric things. You're like, dude.
Yeah, he's like. I wonder who came. That just mean that must be the director like knows him and likes him.
Or Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, true. I guess.
Yeah, you don't pay the fee for Brad Pitt. What is it, like 20-odd million for him to come and do like half a second of shooting? Well, did you also hear this week? Speaking of Marvel, that all the Marvel Netflix shows are coming to Disney Plus on March 16th. So I was a bit concerned because they all left Netflix last week and they didn't say anything, and I was like, because Disney, they're a bit touchy about having more like violent content on the streaming service. But now they're just coming to Disney Plus and they're going to change up the parental settings a little bit. I'm pretty pumped about that.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, they had don't they have like the Fox or like the other?
Yeah, they've got them all.
The other tab in Disney Plus, which is like obviously for adult
Star
content,
or whatever it's called over there.
They just gotta like create a kid. Yeah, they just gotta create a kids thing.
Yeah, they've just got to have their own little niche. And there's already talk about there being a fourth season of Daredevil in the works. I mean, Charlie Cox has been so vocal, like everywhere. He's just like, if he doesn't get it, everyone are going to be so gutted. I feel like he's got such a head start on all of those other guys who did the Marvel Netflix shows. He's just like streets ahead.
He's obviously, but he's already been in Spider-Man.
Yeah, I know, that's what I mean. Like, but that like in getting a show,
Yeah.
like you never know. He probably won't. I mean, the other ones won't. Like the guy who played Iron Fist should definitely not get a show.
He probably prefers to get a movie though.
Interesting
As an actor.
point.
That's the big
ticket.
He wants a Marvel movie.
Do you think they'll give him the classic yellow Daredevil outfit?
I don't think so. No. I hope not.
I mean, if anyone would make it work, it would be Marvel. Like, they've made some terrible outfits work, but I just don't. I don't think that'll happen. Did you hear this week as well that Jason Momoa, favorite of the show, JMO, of our famous rating system, Better or Worse than Aquaman 2018, which we will come to later, apparently he's been cast as the villain in Fast and the Furious 10. Now, it's not really our wheelhouse, Fast and the Furious, I'm not going to lie, but I just find this really interesting.
Is that surprising? He's one of the like actors that like gets mass appeal.
Huge roles,
gets lots of people to theaters. He's fucking yoked.
He's usually the good guy though. I haven't seen him as many bad guys.
It's The Rock though, and The Rock was like a quasi good guy, bad guy.
The Rock's not coming back for Fast and Furious 10. He's very publicly stated he's not doing it.
Well, they have beef.
Yeah, they do. Vinny and the Pebble.
But my point, Vinny and the Brick.
Is that your partner who said that?
Yeah, she's like, why is that one actor always in jungle movies? What is his name? The Brick? I'm like, what the fuck is
he so is the Brick though.
The Brick? You mean The Rock?
I think there must be a clause in all of his contracts where he's got to be in the jungle wearing that one tight shirt.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it looks good on him. You can't blame him.
It looks good.
Although, like, he literally, if he like picks something up and puts it in the cupboard, the shirt will rip. Like,
oh my god,
it's not very usable.
Did you know this about the James Bond movies? So the Daniel Craig one. So there is apparently a well-known fact, and I didn't know this. I heard this recently on another podcast that he has two wardrobes. So he has the same suit for the hero shots, and then the same suit again tailored for fighting scenes. So the suit for the hero shots is so tight that he literally can't move in it, more than like just to like cuff his collar or whatever. But then he's got obviously like
makes sense. Yeah,
like you see him when like there's a scene I remember. I think it's in Skyfall when he jumps onto the back of a moving train. And he just like shakes his shoulders off and like plays with his cuff, and I'm like, that suit is way too tight for you.
Yeah. Looks good though.
But that's a really interesting tidbit. I never knew that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it makes sense. Like, there's no way he'd be doing these stunts in a fucking suit like that. Like, that shit would rip,
in
bro.
like a second.
Like, 10 times over for sure. It's like the shit's painted on. It's like very tight. What else, man? I didn't hear. I mean, I saw that Florence Pugh from Black Widow is being cast potentially in the new Dune sequel as the Emperor's daughter, I believe.
Denis Villeneuve.
Which is interesting because, like, in the book, she doesn't have like that huge of a role other than like those little intro chapter things, like where it's like she's like a scholar. Like, and you like read the little intro chapter thing, and it gives you a bit of history about the world, but she's not like a character.
Well, shout out to our previous episode on the 1984 Dune, which we suffered through. She's actually a pretty big role in that, isn't she? I think she does like a bunch of stuff towards the end. Oh, I know it's completely different to the book.
I mean, like, I vaguely I blacked that one out. You can also shout out
David
to
Lynch.
Our David Villeneuve review of the Dune that just came out, because that's a much better listen and watch.
Oh my gosh. I don't know, man. I like it when we do the ones that you hate. It makes me. I'm willing to do anything bad just to make you laugh. But I think Florence Pugh will be great in that. She's real hot right now,
dude. I remember like seeing her in something. I think she was in like White Gold or whatever, some like little Netflix like comedy with the guy Chuck Bass, the guy from Gossip Girl. He's an English bloke.
I don't know all English people, by the way. Sorry.
I know. I'm just saying you might remember him from Gossip Girl. Chuck Bass, pretty big character. Anyway, he was in that, and he was like a sleazy like window salesman, and in like the 80s in the UK, and she was in that, and she's like a competitive window salesman. And I remember seeing her in that, and I was like, wow, you are a babe. And then like she's now in a bunch of stuff. She's just great. She's
smashing it. Yeah, she's all over the place.
Yeah.
And I love that because apparently she's in the Oppenheimer movie that I think we've done a new casting piece for that every single week since we heard about the movie, the Chris Nolan one. And
I didn't hear about that. I didn't know that she was. Oh, did you mention that last week?
I can't remember, but I think it's been mentioned before. But like she'll be like, she's just great, man. She's She's got many facets to her characters.
Totally. She does.
Speaking of back to comic book stuff, did you hear as well that the Gotham Knights video game, which has been touted to come out this year, has finally got a release date of October 25th? Now, I'll certainly be playing that because I do love everything Batman, as we're about to get into.
Is it the Arkham? Is it the same developer that does the Arkham Asylum or whatever the fuck?
Exactly. This is the same developers who have done all of the Arkham games, but not set in that universe. So the one set in that universe is the Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League game, confusingly.
Okay.
But this is the one that's going to be going up against the Court of Owls, which, spoilers for our conversation coming up, may or may not be in the Batman that we're going to talk about in a moment. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But before we do move on, let us know what you guys have heard. Hit us up at Podcast Assemble on Instagram. Let us know if there's any news we haven't talked about. I know there's been a bunch just in the last couple of days. We love to hear from you, and we also love when you send us memes. I have a stellar meme from one of the friends of the show to share with you in our correspondence section at the very end. However, before we move on, it is time. It's time to announce the competition winner. Drum roll, please. Tally ho, indeed. Yes, we are announcing the competition winner now, much like last time. We asked social media guy Lockie to put all of the competition entrants into a big old hat, a digital hat, that being, and shake it all up, and we came out with the winner, which is... Congratulations, at Nicole Parros. Well done, and thank you very much for tagging your 3 Geekiest friends. We really appreciate it, don't we, DL?
Yeah, totally. Totally.
So reach out to us on Instagram, DM us, slide into our DMs, and we will send you your prize. You can see any of the trailers we saw before the movie. We saw trailers for Top Gun Maverick. We saw Doctor Strange trailers. We saw Black Adam trailers. We saw everything.
I'm laughing at the Top Gun trailer. I was like, surely this movie's movie's been released. Yeah, like 2 years ago. Surely it's been released. Yeah.
Or Nicole, congratulations. You could go and see the movie that we are going to talk about right now. DL, do you want to preface the main topic for this show?
Yeah, and I kind of already ruined it, but we watched The Batman.
The Batman.
It my initial summary is going to be, it wasn't a short movie.
This is going to be a long podcast.
Yeah, it didn't feel long watching it, which is usually a sign that they've done well. And I'm going to say, Tommy, this was a good one. They did well.
Well, why don't you hit me up then with your stupid plot summary?
All right, easy. Emo Batman does some crossword puzzles, dabbles in cosplay, and chases La Paloma con alas with some incels.
What's that? What's the pon? Was that the?
That's actually how you say rat with wings in Spanish. That's
right.
why I was very confused throughout the movie when they put it. Or sorry, no, it's pigeon with wings. But I think that they were saying
intentionally doing it wrong.
I digress.
I like it.
I digress.
I like it. All right, here's mine. Riddle me this, DL. If Bruce Wayne began a solo career, what would the first album title drop be? Answer: Welcome to the Bat Parade. And for any of our My Chemical Romance fans out there, that would be hilarious. But if you don't know them, then you have absolutely no idea what we're talking about.
I mean, it's quite accurate. It's like Bruce, what's this lead singer of that band?
I can't remember his name, but he's done a bunch of comic books as well.
Jared Gerard.
Yeah, Jared something. Yeah. He's great.
He basically is Robert Pattinson in this movie, but a little bit more eccentric.
Yeah, well, do you want to guess for me what the IMDb score for this movie is?
8.7.
Ooh, you're getting closer. 8.5. I like that. I think 8.5 is sort of the right wheelhouse for this. It's actually interesting, though, because when I started writing in my notes for this, it was about 8.7, and I went back on just today onto IMDb to just check a couple of bits, and I was like, oh, that's gone down in the last 2 days. Damn. So
it's interesting.
It fluctuates. Obviously, it was like when it came out and it was all the critics, it was set at like 9.5 or something. And I was like, that is just unnecessary. It's like you talk about every time. You know, critics love to love, man.
I actually think I thought it could have been a 9s, this movie.
All right.
I actually did.
Well, what do you think the Rotten Tomatoes score was then?
That would be like for sure like 90, like 92 average, 90 something. It'd be above 90.
It's
average.
not. It's actually 85%.
For both?
Yeah, 8.5 and 89.
Oh, wow. I'm surprised.
I'm quite surprised by those two, to be perfectly honest.
I mean, that's a good score, but I actually think this is like the more I think about it, like there's very few bad parts of this movie. Like it's a very well written, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, I think we'll get into it in a moment. But before we do, what do you think the Metacritic score was?
That would be, it's always lower, so maybe low 80s, 82.
72. That's pretty
72,
cruel.
man.
That's brutal.
Bullshit, man. I mean, I get it. There was some eye rolly emo Batman moments, but like it fits the part. I think he did well.
We're gonna talk about this because I think a lot of those eye rolly emo Batman parts actually fit the character build really well. I think it just,
for sure,
without sounding like a complete douchebag, I think with a bit of like separation from it, and it's been like 4 or 5 days since I saw it, and I've thought more on it. I've been like, oh my god, actually that works really well. So obviously this movie is a Matt Reeves movie. He's well known for Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, War of Planet of the Apes, Cloverfield, etc., etc. We got the big cast. We got your Robert Pattinsons. We got your Zoe Kravitz, who, by the way, she's definitely my new celebrity crush. I absolutely adored her in this. She was incredible.
I didn't even know about her, and she is just the best.
She is fire. We've got Jeffrey Wright, who I was very, very excited to see as Jim Gordon. We've got Colin Farrell, who we didn't see as the Penguin, but was the Penguin. We'll explain that in a moment. Paul Dano, etc., etc. John Turturro is incredible in this. Now, before we move on, would you like to take a look at the images I've just sent you? And we will be sharing on our Instagram once this podcast comes out. And you can tell us which you think is the goofiest of these two IMDb picks. Now, goofiest IMDb pick, we're not making fun of people. We're not being rude. We're just saying, why on earth would you have this as your, public picture on IMDb? Now, at the moment, we have the challenger, the current MVP, who's actually been going for about 4 or 5 weeks now. So we have Interstellar's Mark Casimir Dinovitz Jr. And again, he plays uncredited NASA inspector. He looks like he's come off of a Guns N' Roses musical video, right? Like he's a lot of things in this picture.
Marky Mark is the off-white, the white on white, basically with the white linen shirt, while also having the Fabio hair. We've talked about it. I think he's being unseated by the new guy, which you're going to tell me his name because I'm not going to get it from this image.
Yeah, this is Douglas Bunn, Bunn, and he is just gangster, uncredited.
Douglas.
And my only note for this was like, what? Can you explain this?
This picture makes me question whether they actually control their IMDb if they're not above a certain level, because this looks like an algorithm just put this like, what would you do? Who would ever do this? He's basically having his face. He's under surgery. It's like a headshot. It is a headshot,
kind of.
It's a headshot of his face, like wrapped like in a surgical towel or I guess like covering.
He's clearly having surgery
to his eye. Yeah, except for his eye, which is being like the only thing of his face you can see, which is clearly under surgery from like doctor's gloves, which are in the headshot. So it's a close up on eye. It's a close up on eye surgery.
Yeah, it feels like they've gone, this is the only thing he's done. Here's a picture from it, and he's only been like, he's only been guy in coma. So that's the only one they can use.
I don't know if he's the doctor or the patient. You assume the doctor or the patient because you could just see a sliver of his eye.
You'd hope.
Yeah, but surely like he probably doesn't have the ability to choose this.
I mean, he surely must. He must have a bad publicist.
Or just doesn't even know IMDb exists and just kind of is a random extra for this.
So who's your winner then? Who do you think is the goofiest IMDb picture out of these?
I mean, like, because the word is goofy, I still kind of feel like we have to stick with Mark. Like, this is just inadequate, like, and weird, but it's not goofy. It's just dumb. It's like, why would you put this?
It's like, why?
It's like Mark is like trying, like this is like because he's trying, it makes it goofy because this is how he tried. You know what I mean? Like this guy just doesn't even get the award for trying. So like my vote would be to stick with Mark.
Well, we did a fan poll of last week's challenger and this week's challenger, and again, he was actually called Doug as well last week, which I'm not going to go back to. I'm not going to get into, but the listeners of the show agreed with you. So Marky Mark won last week. So what we'll do is we'll put this one up again on our Instagram, and we'll do a little poll for you guys, and you can let us know which you think is the goofiest of these two IMDb pictures. Now, do you want to get into talking about the Batman? Because I am really excited to talk about this.
Yeah, should I? Yeah, let's do it. Let's do a little high level overview, shall we? Before we jump in.
Talk to me about this. What's the general plot of this movie? Like, what happens?
Like, there's because we've seen a lot of Batman movies, and so it's like, how do we differentiate them? Like, what are they? So this is actually different in the sense that we follow kind of an early stage Batman. It's like
year
2 years. I think like literally right in the beginning, they narrate. He self narrates that he's 2 years into his vigilante lifestyle, and as he tries to kind of stop criminals via his mission statement, which is "I'm vengeance."
Mission statement. I didn't realize he had a corporate responsibility.
That's his mission statement. He has a corporate responsibility to save Gotham by
corporate responsibility. Man, sounds like a way worse superhero.
Yeah, by don't take the fun out of this. Corporate is vengeance, and his method for accomplishing his mission statement is through fear. Right? Like giving the criminals something to fear in the shadows. Like he may or may not be there at any given moment, but they look to the shadows and they fear the idea of him. And we follow him as he chases, and tries to rid Gotham of the criminal underworld, but he's actually failing. The crime is on the rise. And we basically are introduced to him as he chases, like I think in the first scene, we see the first murder, a serial murderer, the Riddler, as the Riddler tries to unveil a larger conspiracy involving politics, the criminal underworld, and the red and blue, the cops.
Yeah, I love it.
So it's a pretty good little setting, right, that we get to dive into.
And the thing I really like about this right off the bat is that it's not like the other Batman movies where he's early doors Batman, and you have to see his parents getting killed, and you see happy, and all the things you've seen 1,000 times. Like, you don't have to see any of that. What it does is it throws you in at the deep end, and it says like, I'm trying to do good. I'm not quite sure how I'm doing, but like I'm spreading this fear, and that's the sort of like starting point of this movie. And it's so interesting that like it is just this 3-hour epic story of, it's a detective, and for me it's the first time we've really seen Batman on screen detecting, right?
Yeah, I mean the whole thing was like it was a mystery. This is like a movie that has more in common with like Prisoners.
Absolutely.
Or like Zodiac, or like I just named 2 Jake Gyllenhaal movies, but like, or even like Chinatown. Like it's like a psychological thriller with film noir. Like it was, which obviously I'm gonna like this movie when my taste.
Yeah, absolutely, I'm with you.
I love noir. I love criminal mysteries. I love psychological thrillers, and then I like like superhero.
This has
movies,
everything
so
in like a ball rolled up, and one of the things that I found really interesting about this was at the time when I was watching this, I found the Bruce Wayne character quite obnoxious, and we joked about him being like an emo. But when you add the layers to that, the fact that, he's early doors, like he hasn't worked out how to be Bruce Wayne yet, that's a really interesting wrinkle to that character. And it's like you have this dichotomy of a guy who spends his whole life being Batman, and then he doesn't know what to do when he comes to have to be a real guy.
Yeah, and I also think like I felt the same way in the beginning. I remember like as I was watching the first I'm vengeance. Like, I remember I was like, dude, like, I'm not sure I buy this. Like that was my first reaction. And he says it like multiple times throughout the movie. And then the other people make fun of it too, which is like actually really funny. Because it's like, you would make fun of that if you were a criminal. Like, what is this costume dickhead saying? But as I got to more intimate and, more time with the character, like I kind of retroactively changed my opinion about those moments, and I was like, I believe this now. And it's also like the interesting thing is like our Bat. I
was gonna say Robert Pattinbat. Well, I know one of my other favorite podcasts has a fantastic name from which has gone a little bit viral. So I don't want to pretend like I'm trying to copy their nickname for him, but Pattinbat kind of works, right?
Pattinbat, Arbat. Well, because didn't they used to call him Arpat?
Arbat
in like Twilight, and Rob Pats, and he hated it in Twilight. So now they're like, I think they are saying Rob Bats or something, Bat Pat or whatever. Anyway,
Pattinbat.
Poor guy. Anyway, I think it like makes, like, to your point, it makes sense. I would say it makes sense in like, you could say, hey, he's still trying to figure it out, which I think is fair. Like it's early stage, but I think it's also like, there's really 2 ways that like when you think about how someone like Batman is created, it could go, right? This is not the suave Batman that we're used to seeing, or Bruce Wayne, I should say. And I think that's one way it could go. Probably like less likely, but like you're so engulfed by like this trauma, that the way you cope with it is by creating this alternate persona where you're super confident and don't have to deal with it. But there's also a totally other way where it's like you're just so broken and vulnerable that you don't know how to act. You can't hide it, and you lose the ability to be social. Like we see a lot of people when they experience loss and trauma, like they just don't know how to be in a social setting. And that's kind of like more they're kind of isolated and removed from reality. And that's kind of like the way we see him play the character. And to me, it kind of makes more sense. Like if you think about like what Batman actually is, this is like a guy who's taking on like a suicidal, job, right? Like and decides to do it in a way where he wears a fucking costume and becomes a symbol. Like that's not gonna make this suave dude. That like the person that would do that is kind of like a really emotive, weird person, like who would wear eyeliner. Like, it makes sense.
Well, what I find really interesting about that is this movie is so much more than just Batman, and it's really interesting that straight away we're getting into the psychology of the Batman we've been presented in this, but the movie itself, not only does it follow this, naive, I'd say naive, this naive sort of not yet quite hardened Batman, but you also have all these other big storylines going on. You're immediately introduced to the Riddler, who's the sort of big bad of the piece, and he's this Zodiac killer guy who's escalating in violence, who's almost as thorough as Batman, and he's completely psychotic, which is really interesting and looks really young. Weirdly, Paul Dano looks so young. But then you also have the side stories of like. You have the Catwoman side story, so you have Selena Kyle going on in the background, and the John Turturro, all the mob bosses. So we're talking Carmine Falcone, and we've got the Alfred playoff against the Batman. So you have all of these mini subplots within this broader subplot of Batman trying to be Batman trying to learn Batman, be better Batman.
Totally.
With all these little bits sort of like adding into it. But then you've also got like the bigger story, which is the city, which is crumbling around them, which is almost a character in itself for me.
I feel like they just did such a good job weaving all those stories.
Unbelievable.
Like usually when you add that much shit like in a movie, it falls flat. And I think the reason why they did is because again, like you say this and it sounds stupid to say because we repeat it, but when you do that well, it's because it's grounded. Like we're given enough background about the characters to understand their motivations, and their motivations and actions make sense based off of what we do learn about them. Like you do understand why Zoe would act the way she is when you finally get the reveal of her background and who she is in relation to some other characters,
which we'll talk about. Speaking of Zoe, honestly, like talking of performances and the characters, like I mentioned a second ago, like she stole this for me. She was unbelievable. Like outside of maybe Colin Farrell, who really was.
There's a lot of people that you could argue stole this.
Really, but for me, that my focus whenever she was on screen was all her, and not just because she is gorgeous and interesting, and
it helps.
But like everything she did, like all the little ticks she had, the fact that she was clearly very good at herself being a bit of a vigilante. I found all these little like nuances of her character so intriguing, and every time she was on screen, I'd see something different. I'd be like, that's fucking cool.
And she's got a lot of cats.
yeah. But speaking of the character, what do you think? Like, who did you follow?
No, I totally. I kept switching, dude. Cause I totally appreciate that she was awesome, and she kind of felt like what everyone thought Halle Berry was gonna be when they cast her, but she just like slayed it, right?
Yeah, she was incredible.
And they obviously had like a good chemistry, like, which is weird because like they are so different personality wise when in that movie. That it's like the opposites attract kind of thing.
They're both a bit awkward turtle though, aren't they? They're both a little bit weird. They're both a bit like awkward turtle.
They're both scarred, but like hers is like. Not
in real life.
Weird emo. I don't know her in real life. To be fair, I couldn't speak.
Oh, you were calling her Zoe before. I thought you were best friends.
I mean, Rob Pat is definitely awkward. I've seen him in interviews, but like I don't know about her. But my point is, her character in the movie is a little bit more like socially aware than Batman. But I would say the Riddler probably for me was the biggest like hot take, like best superhero villain since Heath Ledger.
Could be. I really enjoyed it, and I liked how they built his character as well. So he was sort of he was this Night Stalker, right? He was sort of in the shadows. He was a lot of things that Batman is. Like I said, he is like the reflection of Batman.
They juxtaposed that.
They did.
It was a foil to Batman, which is like a really interesting concept.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really like the social media aspect of it as well. Like they played that out really well. So like in an age where QAnon is doing weird things in the world, I don't want to get into that, but also like you can weaponize social media, and I found that really interesting. That's what he was doing, and there were flashes of that, like you mentioned, the Heath Ledger's character, but this took it to another level, and I found that super compelling.
He played a psychologically disturbed savant, like somebody who's obviously intelligent, but has like lost touch with reality and is like psychologically and mentally disturbed extremely well.
Big time.
Like you could see that he studied those that had kind of succumbed to that or been brainwashed into extremism. Like he studied it. Like the way he would react when like things didn't go his way was almost like a child when things didn't go the way he had architected them in his mind. Like it was so obvious that he did a lot of research for this role, and he fucking killed it.
Yeah.
And as soon as like I saw the actor in the diner without spoiling things,
and
I saw the profile, man. I was like, oh. But I didn't know that.
Right.
I was like, oh, it's him. I knew the actor. I was like, it's that guy.
PD,
for sure.
Dano was fantastic.
Yeah.
I think all the villains were well crafted in this as well. In terms of Paul Dano, he was obviously the sort of the big bad, the menace in the background. We don't see a lot of him interacting with any of the main characters at all, but you do see people like your Colin Farrell's Penguin, he's Oz in this, or John Turturro as Carmine Falcone interacting with Robert Pattinson.
Yeah.
And the way those characters are built as sleazy crime bosses, Samal and others, and they play them so well.
Colin Farrell was so fucking funny.
He was brutal in this.
He loved it. You could tell he was just loving every minute of that screen time he got.
That prosthetic as well. Wow. I think the only one that really took me out of this was Andy Serkis, and I know I sort of said I almost wrote my own script for this because I know I said last week he's the one that I'm not sure about, and he's not the right age range. He's not the right age fit for me. Like if he was supposed to be the Wayne's butler 20 years ago, whatever it was, and he was a little bit older, he'd already been in the forces, and I'm like, he should be older, right?
I don't know. It's a young Batman. I don't think the age took me out of it. I think it was more like, is he South African?
I don't think so. I think he's English. I think he's British.
Anyway, it wasn't really that took me out of it. It's just, I think they didn't do him any favors the way I think of all the things that were poorly written, the sequence where there's a big reveal and he's in the hospital, I thought that could have been done in a variety of other ways.
Yeah,
it was a lot of plot exposition and dialogue, and it was like telling instead of showing kind of thing. And so I don't think they did him any favors. He wasn't terrible. He just wasn't as good as everyone else.
Yeah, true.
Right? Like everyone else was like A+. So when you're like kind of BC, like it looks even worse, right? So
when you're hitting those 60s.
I think, yeah, exactly.
Well, man, I mentioned before, I thought like Gotham was its own character. What did you think of like the cinematography in this? Because like you mentioned wet and rainy before, but wow.
Yeah, I mean it was like very, very wet and rainy. It was definitely a beautifully, even though it was very similar to like the other DC, dark palette, but
I didn't think it was. I thought it had more color. I felt like the colors were really vibrant.
It had more red. It was dark and red. It had a lot of reds. I guess my point was it was like that, but it wasn't as like bland.
Okay.
So somehow they made it still feel grimy and alive, not just like bland and dark. And like, oh, it's another DC movie that's dark.
I felt like it was really like gothic almost. Like you could tell it had almost a little bit of inspiration from those 89 Michael Keaton Batman film and stuff. I mean, this had the cinematographer who did Dune and like The Mandalorian and like Rogue One, so it was gonna be beautiful. Like Dune was one of my favorite movies for cinematography, probably in the last like 10 years, and like he had his like imprint all over this.
Yeah, I mean there was definitely some emo Batman shots that were a bit too long for me. I was like, okay, you don't have to like zoom in and hold it on his like little hair strand this long. Like let the man have some space. But it was really good, and the music was too, man. I did find some of the music like a bit uncharacteristically off. Like the Nirvana thing, I thought it was like a good thing for a trailer.
Yeah, right.
But like I don't know if I'd have put it in the actual like film. I don't know how you felt about that.
It's a great movie if you like Nirvana, especially that one song.
Yeah, most of the score was like spot on. But like some of the like I guess artist choices, I was like, this is more of a trailer. I don't know if this fits the mood of the film you've kind of
But I felt like the emo mood is what it was going for. But speaking of the music sound, there was a really interesting wrinkle I noticed, like partway through the film, and I turned to my buddy and I was like, dude, like listen out for this, because there was a bit, and I think it might have been when they were in the old orphanage, and what happened was,
it's creepy.
You had this zoom in on the Batman and Gordon, and the music was swelling, but only on the right side of the cinema. If you really listened, in the back left, you could still hear the rain pattering on top of the roof. So they clearly were very precise with how they organized the music and the sounds, so that they played off against each other, but you kept that pounding rain all the time, like above you, and it was just really well orchestrated.
I felt right at home, you know.
Dude, I'm in England.
I guarantee you it rained more here.
Probably actually, but a lot of it was filmed in like Scotland and Liverpool. Ironically speaking of, so
really,
yeah,
it looked like New York.
No, it was it did, but like a lot of it was filmed like I say, especially in Scotland, and it kind of, you can see where the dreariness came from, like the grimy, the gothic nature of it, which is, you know, a pretty awesome wrinkle. What did you think of the action then in this? Like, it was a bit few and far between, I thought,
which was fine.
Yeah.
Like, I thought every time, so like, I thought that like action and pacing, I think, are almost kind of similar topics that you should talk about. Obviously, action has its own thing, but it's like every time, like for a 3-hour movie, it did not feel like a 3-hour movie. A.
Agreed.
B. Like the action, every time where the story was kind of slowing down, it was like obviously developing one of the subplots that needed to be developed before the story came to a crescendo. And I was like, there was an action sequence. Like they were just like perfectly timed, and they weren't too long. And I didn't feel like the CGI took me out of it. Like I felt like minus like that one part where like Batman should have been squashed like a bug. I wasn't pulled out of the realism of the film. Like I was, other than that, and maybe the part where he was like literally next to the explosion and like it blew up in his face and he was like fine.
And from the trailer when he's at the funeral, yeah.
Other than those two things, but like the action was it felt brutal.
It
like
did.
When Batman got hit, I was like ooh. And when he got shot, I was like, oh.
He was a bit bulletproof.
I think they took it a bit too far with like the shotgun to the chest, not actually doing anything.
And also, there's a bit when he's walking down a corridor it is in the trailer, and they're like literally machine gunning him, and he just keeps walking. I'm like, at bare minimum, you're taking a step back from that, you know?
I think that like in that sequence, you didn't see enough. Maybe he did. It was like kind of like a strobe light sequence, right?
It was
like
very cool the way they did that. It was that dark and light. Awesome. Yeah, using light really interestingly, and I thought that was a nice little wrinkle to the action.
I think like between the car chases, the nightclub lights, the blackout gun fight that you're talking about, which was like a strobe light sequence, the action was pretty epic, and like you're right, they used light and the environment really, really well to make each fight feel unique and earned and like for a purpose, even when it didn't have a purpose.
Well, we're going to talk about it in a minute.
The first nightclub battle had no reason to be a fight.
Yeah.
He could have just snuck in and gotten the guy, but like they added it in and it was still memorable. Anyway,
we're going to talk about it in a minute. I think my favorite action scene, and I won't go into too much because it's a little bit spoilery, was in the police precinct when it's escaping, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But that, for me,
that was pretty cool.
Was just epic,
and they were quick, right? Like they weren't like these long drawn out things. They were like particular for the moment.
But that's right though, right? Because I feel like a real life fight, like you're not going to be fighting someone for 15 minutes. It doesn't happen. Your body cannot go for, and getting hit in the head as well. You physically can't do that.
Yeah.
Like it's impossible. So I feel like it was more realistic in a sense for its fight stuff. But we talked about pacing a lot. Can we just condense our feelings on that? Like I just want to know, like you've said, it was long, but it wasn't drawn out. You didn't feel like it was 3 hours. But that is the key issue people have been having with this, that it's 3 hours long. Do you want to just expand a little bit on that?
I don't think that's fair, to be honest. Like people are going to complain about long movies. Like
sure.
Fair enough. You obviously had to pee at the hour and a half point. I get it. But shut up. It wasn't bad. Like
shut up yourself.
Yeah, it was largely an earned 3 hours.
Yeah, I agree.
Like you could point to maybe like 15 minutes that could have been cut, but they'd have still been complaining if it was like a 2 hour and 45 minute movie. So like I think about like the last battle sequence in the amphitheater as like, okay, maybe like that was a bit too long and like
that's what I think could have been cut.
Crescendo-y.
Okay. Right.
But yeah,
let's come back to that because I feel like I have a way to fix this, and we'll talk about it at the end. But that is the bit that I feel, once like without going too spoilery, it does end in like a big final battle, and I felt that was a little bit by committee. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like they sort of were like, oh, we can't have a Batman movie without having a big old fight scene, so let's add one in. I'm like, come on, guys, you don't need it. You've just made probably my favorite Batman movie so far.
I agree. They did kind of just do that because they felt they had to, and they for the most part they did not succumb to that itch, and so it was kind of annoying to have it at the end, but it wasn't even that bad. Like, it was still pretty cool because it was like, yeah, we can't really talk about it because there's spoilers.
It is spoilery. What do you think the tones and themes were for this movie then?
That's a good question. I was trying to think about that, and I think it's like the fear is a tool that, when used like in a I don't have a succinct theme, to be honest, but the fear is a tool thing kept like, and like vengeance turning into hope.
Yeah, okay.
And being like, feel like it's kind of like the theme of like, if you rule by fear, you're not gonna rule for long.
Okay.
Like that kind of theme, I think poured through in the way that like Batman's corporate statement kind of transforms by the end of the movie.
Bring that joke back.
I think that would probably be my biggest thing.
So you would say he changed his corporate statement throughout the movie?
I would, and I think that there's a message there and a theme. And I would also say that it's probably
Absolutely.
like, what goes around kind of comes around was part of the themes too. Like the unearthing, like, if you do enough shit, like it's gonna come back to bite you in the ass, and that was kind of a theme for multiple characters. But I'm curious what you thought. I didn't put enough thought into that one.
Yeah. We can get into that. I kind of thought a little bit about belonging and obsessions, a lot of it, especially obsession, like like the Riddler's fixated on certain things, whether it's his riddles, whether it's him getting his payback, and he just forgot to be a human being, you know what I mean? He just turned into this absolute psychopath. So I found that a really interesting theme that sort of like wove through the movie. And obviously you then flip that with Batman's obsession with vengeance.
I'm vengeance.
with Batman's corporate statement. All right then. Do you want to do 3 best and 3 worst? So for anyone who's new to this, we do our 3 best and 3 worst non-spoilery things. 3 reasons why we think you should see the movie without spoiling it, and 3 reasons why we think maybe you could think things to watch out for that maybe might put you off about the movie.
Yeah, I think I would say the writing is phenomenal.
Yeah,
like
agrees.
Both like from like the call outs, like the certain character moments, the character build, the backstories, and then like the actual dialogue. For the most part, there was a couple parts where I was like, oh, this is straight from the comics. It's like, oh, Falcone's the match and Riddler's the fire. I was like, dude, or the gasoline or something like that. I was like, oh, cut that out, stop that right now.
Cut it.
But I would say the writing overall.
I really liked some of the. Sorry, I really liked some of the like, not dialogue. What's the word I'm looking for? I really liked some of the fact that it was almost like a journal narration, and it was kind of structured like a graphic novel. I thought that really worked well with it, even though at the beginning I was like, oh, it's a bit lame. But towards the end, I was like, oh yeah, that actually really works.
Yeah, I think the writing and the one-liners and all of it together, like the dialogue, the character moments, there was like certain moments where like the twins where they like get beat up by Batman but then let Bruce Wayne in. Like there was just a lot of like societal call outs as well, like that were like really subtle and not in your face, the incel stuff. So I just thought overall the writing was just phenomenal. The castings and performances, obviously, like any movie where we're kind of praising it as much as this one, like those have to be on point, and they for like 95% of it were. And then just the fact that like this was like a scary movie. Like this was the scariest movie
Agreed.
I've seen.
Like
it was like the scariest Batman movie I've seen, and yet it was still grounded in realism. And like you didn't need to be a Batman fan to watch this movie and enjoy it. So like I thought that if I'm gonna give Batman apart something, like just because you haven't seen all the other Batman, like this is kind of in a league. It's kind of like the Joker in that way. It's in a league of its own. Like you don't have to have the backstory.
And that perfectly leads into my first one, which is like I absolutely love the world building. This felt like a Saw movie with a superhero in it. And that's that world building around Gotham as like almost a character and its inhabitants and this weird dude who's going out and beating people up. Like I thought it was so well done, the building of this, and it felt real. The world, where they were living in, and I know that Chris Reeve, that's not his name. I know that Matt Reeves, the director, he's not Superman, but he said this world doesn't have magic at this point. There is no Superman at this minute, so it's as real as it could be. And I thought that was really interesting. I also said the use of sound. We talked about it before. The rain. There were scenes when the Riddler used like mice for certain things.
Oof, that was creepy.
We'll talk about it in a minute. But you could hear them like scratching, and you were like, that's real rough to hear. But then also I felt like this was the most comic book movie we've had since like your Spider-Man 2s. It felt like a graphic novel. It was like, without it being like a splash page in a scene, it was really, I thought it was just super interestingly done, and it kept a lot of the love that you get from those graphic novels.
Yeah.
But anyway, what are your 3 worsts?
Yeah, and this is like so nitpicky because guys, I really liked this movie.
Yeah.
I think like if you have to give a criticism, like, but to me it's like this is like a 92, not a 98, right? Like there, like we just talked about it. There was that longer battle sequence in the end.
Hey, we don't give percentages.
Yeah, you're good point. But I'm talking about for the other people. Yeah. Not myself.
Okay.
Because again, I wouldn't actually make this a big complaint. It's a very minor one. It's a single piece of paper, not a ream. Bit long in the end. Like you're right. There's a couple areas you could have cut to make it more. So just like totally, make it super super sharp. And I already mentioned some of the music where I was like, oh, this kind of pulled me out, like the Nirvana. Like I get it. It does fit. You're right. It does fit the tone, but I just didn't need like lyrics in the music, like, you know what I mean? Even if it was just the audio of the Nirvana, like not Kurt Cobain's voice. And then I think one of the this is like probably the most significant one that I would say, one of the big plot twists was pretty obvious, and like and that's okay. Like it's not a big deal. It didn't like, because there were other character twists that were less obvious, but it was not helped by the way it was revealed as well, which I kind of talked about with Alfred, and part of why I think his character fell a bit flat. So I'd say like those would be the biggest one, but honestly, man, it's just nitpicking. How about you?
My worst, like I say, it seemed like it had a 4th act. It was just too long. I felt like there was a bit tacked on at the end that was maybe by committee, and I was a little frustrated by the fact that a lot of this movie was spoiled by the trailers. And I know nowadays, that's how trailers are. And
what parts? I guess we can't talk about it yet because it's still spoilers.
No. Well, yeah, but like there's a lot of psychological studies about people who go into movies and they want to know what happens. So that's why the trailers end up spoiling it. People don't like not knowing what's going to happen in the movie, which I find really, really strange. But I did feel like a lot of it was spoiled in said trailers, and just that Aquaman wasn't in it.
Yeah, you really ran out of things, didn't you?
I really did. I completely did.
By the way, we can cancel this topic. I know what you're about to ask. We can cancel this topic this week. It doesn't even need to be said. It
does need to be said, and this is our rating system. This is how we do it. Is this better or worse than the most bang average movie that we can think of, which is Aquaman 2018?
Dude, this is not even in the same stratosphere as that movie. Like as they said, this is a different universe. This is not DC 1092. It is fucking whatever it is, and it's
Universe 2.
Yeah, Universe 2, and it's much better. It's much better in Universe 2. The air is cleaner.
I prefer Universe 2. Yeah. Less magic.
Yeah.
Well, the air's wetter.
Yeah. Is it in the same universe as the Joker? Have they qualified that or not?
They haven't said.
Yeah. They may, if it makes sense, they might do it. Yeah, kind of thing.
I mean, it would make money, but that's not the point, DL. The point is we're going to talk about spoilers now. So spoiler warning for this movie right here, right now.
Yeah.
The Joker sting. Talk to me.
The Joker sting? You mean the end?
So there is a scene when you see Paul Dano going into prison. Paul Dano's Riddler is in prison, and he is in a cell next door to Barry Keoghan. I'm not going to say his name right. Either Barry Keoghan, I don't know.
It's the guy that's in everything these days. Yeah,
the guy from Eternals.
I could tell it right away. I was like,
who is credited as unseen Arkham prisoner, but we all know
which is obviously the Joker. Yeah.
What did you think of that?
Well, I actually like that because
not really a sting.
I actually like that because like so much of the Joker's backstory, at least as I remember it in the cartoons and the comics, was about Arkham.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you say it?
Arkham.
That like insane asylum's like prison thing, and like it's never really been dabbled in like the recent movies, at least. Like
not as much.
So it's like this is good that they're taking it there, and it makes sense that these two would like be weird together. So I'm all about it.
It's really interesting because there's a cutscene from this movie which is very Silence of the Lambs-esque. So Batman goes to Arkham and he speaks to another prisoner who we don't know to get information on why this killer's doing it, what he's doing, etc., etc. And it's meant to be a proto-Joker, and Matt Reeves has talked about this. And I think that makes more sense to have that scene in there rather than having this weird stinger at the end. Or, oh, he's next to the Joker, he's going to be going crazy in the next film. I think that's more interesting, having that. You have that build of like a relationship between the Batman and the Joker, and the Joker starts to understand the Batman and vice versa.
You could have had both. I thought
it'd be way better.
You could have had it been the same guy.
I went way off topic for what we should have been talking about for the spoilers. The structure of this movie is sort of about the Waynes and how they're not perfect, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of kick.
I mean, that's like the big twist. And also the twist that like Falcone, the main this is the one I was talking about in my 3 worst. Like the Falcone, the main gangster, was like the witness. Like he was the guy that like there was a witness that they were all
He was the rat.
Yeah, he was the rat. They were all trying to find a rat who basically ratted on the old gangster Maroney or something. I forget about.
What's the Jack Nicholson movie with Matt Damon?
Oh, The Departed.
Yeah, The Departed. Yeah. It's that again, right? Like it's just that.
Yes, it is. You're right. It's exactly that. It's the same exact plot line. So like maybe that's probably why I naturally knew it was going to happen, because I've watched that movie 10 million times and love it. But they built it up so much, and I was like, I know what's going to happen here. Like it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. Well, it seemed it was going that way. But the interesting wrinkle there was that, you know, in every iteration of Batman we've seen, you know, the Waynes, Bruce's parents, Thomas and Martha, are these like saints, and you know, they were killed in cold blood and etc., etc. Whereas in this, there's like an extra layer added to it whereby
no one's a saint.
Thomas was running for mayor, and someone found out that Martha maybe was having some psychological problems. The one person he turns to in his moment of desperation is Falcone, who's the wrong person to turn to,
which is his mistake.
And he ends up killing this reporter to have something over Thomas Wayne, and that just happens to be the night that they died. So it's interesting that it's Bruce finding out they're maybe not perfect.
Yeah, and it's like that moment that everyone finds out like about their parents, and he never had that moment probably because they died when he was a kid, so he's having it way later.
Exactly.
And it's like it's a really interesting way to do it, and it's also like really like I think it doesn't remove the fact that like they were for the most part good people, because you can kind of you almost feel like this is actually more a statement against society, where he's trying to run for mayor and he's having to justify why his wife has this totally natural occurring thing, which is mental health, and he's trying to help her. And instead of that, like he knows that'll be used against him, so he is pushed, like society's pushed him into this way where he does make a choice, and it's the wrong choice. But it's like, why was that choice even needing to be made, right? Like, and that's not his fault.
One thing we didn't talk about, which is really interesting, is that this is a very modern Batman. So like this is set like now.
For sure.
Like everything's exactly the same, social media, iPhones. And it's interesting in a society that's supposedly, you know, more understanding, and mental health is a topic that people talk about now. It's something that he sees as he isn't able to get past for his mayoral campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it was, that being said, it was like that probably would have happened in the, like, this is modern, like in the 90s, or like, you know, it still would have been, maybe. But what I also liked about it is the fact that, you know, it is set in modern times, but it still pulls off this noir feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is generally, it's hard to pull that off in a modern setting. Like you know what I mean? Like, and part of the way they did it well, I think, was like how they used the technology, like how Batman's contacts were like this really cool future technology where you could record everything you saw. But I love that idea. But it was like in this weird, like fish lensy.
That was the magic.
Yeah, like noir way, and I was like, wow, that's fucking well done.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool.
And that was one of the ways they built the relationship between Batman and Selina, which I found really cool.
Yeah, it was like super intimate.
He asked her to go in undercover, essentially, and she's got one of these eye things in, and he's learning more, and she's rebelling, and it's a really, like, the dynamic between them just really popped for me.
And it was super detective-y. You're right. It was like a detective story.
Yeah, absolutely. And the detecting was obviously the key part of this film, and that's what I wanted, man. I just wanted a detective Batman for once. And the fact that he couldn't find out who the Riddler was, even though he's leaving him all these clues, was just, you know, just so frustrating, even for the viewer.
And it's like, how could you, right? Like, you know, from a clue, just find the one guy that was this dude, right? Absolutely. It's like, it was like an unfair game.
That's what a good detective does.
Yeah, and no, for sure. But my point is, like, it was almost impossible. And I think that, like, the murder mystery really did keep us on our toes the entire time. And it was just the best thing one of the best things I think they did in this movie. And we haven't talked about the writing enough, like, but it was just so well done. So, like the concept, which is not an entirely new concept, that like Batman actually inspired his enemies to up the ante, right? That's not a new, that's kind of a trope, I think, in superhero films. But
Vision says it in Age of Ultron.
Yeah, exactly.
No, not Age of Ultron, the other one.
Whatever. It's like, are we causing this, right?
Civil War.
But it hits home all the more in this one because of how they do it's a slow build where they foil and they juxtapose Batman and the Riddler, and it's revealed in these subtle, like it's done in these subtle hints that throughout this story, while these gruesome serial murders are happening, Bat probably doesn't really think the Riddler's victims, like that he thinks that the Riddler's victims kind of got what they had coming. And so because you kind of can subtly see that as the movie progresses, you start to realize how similar. And they're also trying to get to the same goal. And they're almost in this weird way working together to get there, even though Batman doesn't even know. It's this like perfect fucking character juxtaposition. Yeah. It was so well done.
And that's so interesting how it ends. Yeah. And the Riddler actually thinks he's so psychotic. He thinks that Batman is working with him to announce to the world all these people are corrupt.
And there's an element of truth to that, though.
And it's so interesting. And there's the bit where you think he knows that Batman is Bruce Wayne, and he's going, Bruce Wayne, and you're like, oh my god, he knows. Yeah. And then you realize that he's actually saying the one we didn't get was Bruce Wayne, and it's like,
that was so well written.
Like, he doesn't know he's Bruce Wayne, and even if he does, he just doesn't care.
Yeah, it was so fucking well written, and I think that, like, if my take on that is if he did know, that would really fuck up his whole perspective and mindset on the world. But there's a couple moments, like when we're talking about great writing, like with kind of situational irony where like the viewer knows, but like they don't. You're like, oh my god, it is Bruce Wayne. He is this rich guy, and you're actually wrong about him. Like, he's the one actually more like you. And at the same time, it's kind of like, yo, Batman, you have more in common with this guy than you think. And then there's a couple jokes as well with like Zoe with Catwoman, where she's like, oh, this fucking white privilege in the world. I'm like, if you only knew. Like, there's a lot of,
you can see he's white.
But like she's like, you're obviously rich, like, and it was like, well, spot on, he is. Like, there was really good writing in that in a couple of different areas.
And that's why I find that last scene where everything crumbles, and even though the Riddler's in jail, so they catch the Riddler, right? So he's gone to jail, but he still has his plan, and his plan is to blow up the seawall, which is against Gotham, flood half the city, and then have a bunch of random dudes dressed in Riddler outfits go and try and take out the mayoral elect. And it's like, where has this come from? Like, you've had no interest in this mayoral elect. She's not she's not one of the corrupt people. She's not one of the ones you've been targeting this whole thing. This is like a weird U-turn for your character. And then there's all these incels that you talked about who go after her. To me, it felt real tacked on. And this is,
you didn't like that? I didn't mind the story. I thought that it just, like, the length of it was I didn't mind where the story
I think it was just to have Batman have another fighting scene. Like, it's just to have him fight someone.
I think it was also a statement on society. Like, this is what brainwashing does. Like, a lot of what he's saying is true, and when in the build up, and when you get to a point of extremism and brainwashing, like, you can take that to too far. Like, he's like, this new person's going to be the exact same, and with social media and, like, as you said, QAnon, like, that can actually be a really, really powerful and I guess effective way of brainwashing and scaling out bad thoughts, basically bad actions and philosophies.
Sure. I have a minor addendum to the script, if you may allow me.
Do it. I'm curious. Yeah. Do a little bit of Tommy's fan fiction.
We could have fixed this. We can fix this movie, right? So we can shave off 30 minutes in the process. So for me, how the ending of this film coulda, woulda, shoulda gone, and you can stop me at any time, is when they get to the orphanage. So there's a fantastic bit where Jim Gordon and the Batman get to the orphanage, and they find out that it's all centered around Thomas Wayne and his mayoral campaign to become mayor. And essentially what happens is the Batman just goes and then he has a big fight. Whereas the way I would have loved to have seen it was, this is where it becomes even more Saw than we've seen already. Mm-hmm. This becomes essentially an Arkham game. The door's shut behind them. They're in a maze. You then have to see him doing more detecting. He's got to do more riddles. He's got to work everything out as he goes. Even him and Gordon can be split, even better. okay, maybe have a few scuffles along the way or whatever. He gets to the end, but he doesn't get any satisfaction out of getting to the end of the riddle. So the Riddler could even already be in prison. It could all be social media, and he's, you know, doing it from his prison cell, and you couldn't have known that all along. And he's just getting all his incel guys to go and murder all these random people. And there's no satisfaction in it. There's nothing. But he's done all the detecting and he's got there. And at the end of the day, he's had this awesome adventure through Arkham Asylum, essentially. Like, we just get the video game again. And that's how I feel.
I'm not saying it's bad.
You could have cut off 30 minutes of this movie.
I'm not saying it's bad. I just think that it's like a little less believable. Like, having one incel event is like hard enough. Having them orchestrate this whole thing with people you haven't met and trust. Like, it kind of,
he got 50 of them to go and shoot at the mayor.
Yeah, but that's
whatever,
like one.
man.
That's
Come
like
on.
one mass shooting. Like, not orchestrating this whole scheme from prison on a phone that he's not supposed to have. To me, it's like it takes away from the Riddler's like kind of evil geniusness, and
I think it adds to it. If he can play all these fiddles and he can like marionette all these people without even having to be there, I think it makes it more interesting. But that's just me.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
Opinions,
now,
I guess.
There's a lot of things we haven't talked about.
Just to put a button on their relationship, I just loved how they kind of worked together, both advertently and inadvertently, to achieve this outcome. And it kind of like, it kind of just feels like, you know, how far away, you know, there's such a similarity in their beliefs. That scene where that actually hits home for Batman in such a real way, just highlights like how fine the line is between like madman and like hero. And they really explore that. And
Absolutely.
It's almost just a matter of like perspective and perception and experience, which is a cool little thing they touched on. But yeah,
we're unfortunately rapidly running out of time, so I just wanted to ask one last question. There's so much of this we haven't talked about, and I think we'll probably come back to it at some point. But my last question for you is this your new favorite Batman movie?
It's hard not to do the recency bias, right?
It's true.
And I've seen like The Dark Knight so many times. I will say this: it's The Dark Knight, and I can't say that it beats it just because like I'm still, you know, it's I need more time. What I'll say though is the character moments in this are much better done than anything Christopher Nolan's even tried to do. So that
he's not great with character moments.
That leads me to say like it might be
interesting. Well, for me, it's still 1997's Batman and Robin with George Clooney and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Of course, yeah,
so.
You love that one.
No, I think it comes down to the villains, and I can't get past Heath Ledger's performance as, you know, the Joker. He was amazing. Paul Dano was phenomenal in this. Like, he was another level, but Heath just wins it for me. Right, before we move on, do you want some true or false trivia very quickly?
Yeah, do it to it.
Robert Pattinson's screen test for this, before officially cast, took place while he was in rehearsals for shooting Tenet in 2020 in Los Angeles. Pattinson had to lie to Christopher Nolan so he could go off and do his screen test. Is that true or false?
Well, I know that most of what you said is true. I don't know about the lie part, but I think it'd be cool if he did, so I'm going to say true.
It's very true, and apparently Chris Nolan just somehow knew that that's what he was doing. I find that fucking really interesting. Like,
because Chris is plugged in.
Chris Nolan just knows people. He just knows, and apparently he even congratulated him before he told anyone else that he'd got the part. Like, what?
So he was just,
how do you know this?
And he's like, wait, you knew that I went to that interview or that casting? I was really surprised that Pattinson did this. It like, you know, it's a franchise film.
I like it though.
I'm glad he did, but I'm just surprised he did.
I am as well.
Yeah.
He signed on for 3 as well, apparently.
Oh, epic!
Maybe another time we can talk about potential futures.
Well, I was gonna ask, is that because they set it up well? Anyway, sorry, carry on.
You're running out of time.
Yeah.
So next, what do we call him? Robert Pattinbat. Robert Pattinbat revealed while screen testing for the role that he would sneakily take pictures around the set as a memento, just in case it didn't work out. Is that true or is that false?
False.
It is false. He actually took a selfie of himself in the outfit, which is interesting in itself because he actually screen tested in Val Kilmer's original Batsuit for Batman Forever, funnily enough going back to the 90s. Because Pattinbat's head didn't fit into the cowl, he had to use George Clooney's, who famously apparently has a huge head and a tiny body.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
So interesting.
Yeah, I feel for him. I have a big head as well. A very large head.
Yeah, I can see that, mate.
Yeah.
Bloody hell, mate. Right, calm down. Bloody hell. Finally, Jonah Hill was apparently approached for the role of the Penguin, but he turned it down due to disagreements over the character's arc. Is this true or is this false?
Well, I could see that, although it because the Penguin didn't really have an arc. It was like a subtle. It was more like an introduction to that character, and a good one. I could say that's true.
It is true. He apparently wanted to play the Riddler instead.
Makes sense. There's more to dig into. Yeah.
Yeah. Jonah wants these big, interesting parts, like working with Scorsese, etc. Damn, I imagine him doing that and doing it well.
I can even imagine the green costume.
The Jim Carrey one.
Yeah. With like Jonah Hill and the glasses, like the slick back hair that's like orange.
Riddle me this.
Yeah, I could see it.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for sticking with it. That was our... Well, I actually really liked talking about this today.
That was fun. I mean, it was a really good movie. Yeah.
I feel like there's so much more we could have got into, and there's so much we didn't get to talk about. Like John Turturro was like the bad guy. We didn't talk enough about it, but thank you all for sticking with it. We do really appreciate it. We have a couple of bits of correspondence before we sign off, DL.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So first and foremost, every week we ask friends of the show if they would send us some superhero memes. And this week, friend of the show, Bertie, stepped up to the plate magnificently. He sent us a meme, which I've just shared with DL, and we'll probably share on our social as well. Follow us at Podcast Assemble if you want to get in contact. And it is just a picture. Oh, you could describe it, DL.
I'm looking. Okay, yeah, I see it. When you're a lonely, dark man on a path of revenge and you meet an orphan.
So it's the original 60s Spider-Man meme where it's, the Spider-Men are pointing at each other, and it is Geralt from The Witcher. It's Batman, and it's a Mandalorian.
Yeah, the orphan storyline is a big part of the hero's journey.
Well, thank you, friend of the show, Bertie. Please do send us those at Podcast Assemble if you want to send them over. Friend of the show, Jacob, hit us up this week.
Awesome.
And he was asking, who do you think was a better Batman DL? Ben Affleck or Robert Pattinson?
Robert Pattinson.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, he went a bit rogue and said his favorite was actually Bale after asking you a completely different question. So that wasn't an option for you. So you had to choose.
I think that he did more with the role. He took it in a very, very new direction. Like no one's really had a Batman like his before. Whereas, Ben Affleck was more traditional.
The no kill rule was back, baby.
Yeah. Batman was he was more like a traditional Batman, not the killing part, but like just like the persona.
Thank you, friend of the show, Jacob. We really do appreciate it. And finally, friend of the show, Matt. We love it, friend of the show, Matt. He's like our correspondent at the minute. I mean, there are actually 2 or 3 Matts, but this one's been in like the last 3 weeks in a row. Like, good on you, friend of the show, Matt. And we ask every week to send over any bits of news we didn't mention up top. And he mentioned, did you hear this week that Beetlejuice 2 is apparently in development, with Michael Keaton coming back to the role? Did you see Beetlejuice back in like the 80s, 90s?
Yeah, I saw it. I mean, I don't remember it that well, but
I remember it. It freaked me out as a kid. I was super young when I saw it, way too young.
I was, to be honest, I was scared of it because of the makeup and stuff. Like I feel like nothing for this, to be honest, but interesting.
I'm intrigued. It was a weirdly sexualized movie from what I remember.
Really?
So let's see where they take this.
Keaton is such a he's back kind of like he's in a lot of shit.
He's a mad dog. I can't wait to see that Flash movie. Like I know it's a bit of a joke, but like I genuinely cannot wait to see it. All right. Well, thank you all again for sticking with it. We really do appreciate it. Where can they hit us up if they want to get in contact, DL?
As always, the podcastassemble@gmail.com or Podcast Assemble on Instagram. At us. You can at us.
Hit us up. Let us know. Send us memes. We do love it. And let us know who you thought was better, Affleck or Pattinson, or Bale, or Clooney, or Val Kilmer, whoever you think. We'd love to know. Send us memes, as we say. Thank you all for passing the pod, as always. And give us a 5-star review. I think, did you give us a 5-star this week, DL?
Give us a 5-star review. I haven't yet. I'm saving mine. But you can give us a 5-star review. You can give us a follow or a mention. You can really do whatever you want, man. We're easy.
You can give us a Drake lyric if you really want. Yeah. And thank you, as always, to Lockie, our social media guy. And thank you, DL.
Thank you, Tommy. It's been real.
Tally ho.